The airport was busy, people rushing everywhere, when a pilot suddenly pointed at a young black boy and called security. The boy froze, he had no idea what was happening. Moments later, the pilot's smug smile disappeared, because the boy's father arrived, and he wasn't just any dad, he was one of the most powerful men in aviation. The voice cut through the bustling noise of the airport like a sharp blade slicing through fabric. The echo bounced off the walls, silencing conversations and halting footsteps. People turned, eyes scanning to see who had spoken and who the command was aimed at. There he was, Malik Carter, a 14-year-old boy in a bright red hoodie, jeans slightly too long for his legs, and a well-worn backpack hanging off one shoulder. He froze mid-step, his sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. Every curious gaze now locked on him. Malik felt heat rush to his cheeks. He hadn't done anything wrong, had he? For as long as he could remember, Malik had been fascinated by airplanes. Back home, he would spend hours at a small park near the runway of the local airport, sitting on the grass, eyes to the sky, watching massive jets roar overhead. He could identify models just by the sound of their engines. His dream? To one day sit in the captain's seat, hand on the controls, guiding hundreds of passengers safely through the clouds. Today was supposed to be special. His first solo flight, just him, no parents, no siblings, heading to visit his Aunt Clara in another state. His mother had hugged him tight at the drop-off, reminding him to call when he landed. His father had ruffled his hair and said, "One step closer to your dream, champ." Everything had gone smoothly at first. Malik passed through security, found his gate, and sat quietly, earphones in, watching planes taxi along the runway. Then he saw it, the cockpit door of his plane stood wide open. From where he sat, he could see flashes of buttons, switches, and glowing screens inside. His heart thudded in excitement. This was his chance to see the place he'd only ever imagined. Malik glanced at the boarding area staff, they seemed busy scanning tickets and talking to passengers. No one was looking his way. He rose from his seat, adjusting his backpack strap, and walked slowly toward the open door, each step making his pulse quicken. He could almost smell the faint scent of electronics and leather from the cockpit. The pilot's seat was right there, just a few more steps and he could look inside. But before Malik could get close enough, a figure appeared in the doorway, Captain Reynolds. Captain Reynolds was a tall man with a pressed Navy uniform, a gold-striped cap, and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. His sharp blue eyes scanned Malik instantly, narrowing with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" he barked, his voice low but tense. Malik's words stumbled over each other. "Sir, I was just..." "You can't be this close to the plane," the pilot snapped, stepping forward. Malik's stomach dropped. He raised his hands slightly, palms open, the way people do when they want to show they mean no harm. "I'm sorry. I was only curious. I wanted to see the..." Captain Reynolds cut him off sharply. "Don't move. I'm calling security." The harshness in his voice felt like a punch. Malik's excitement drained, replaced by a sick, sinking feeling. People at the gate began to murmur, some craning their necks to see what was happening. A woman whispered to her husband, "What's that boy doing?" A little kid clutched his mother's hand and stared wide-eyed. Malik tried again, his voice barely above a whisper, "I promise I wasn't going to touch anything." But Captain Reynolds had already pulled out his radio. "This is Captain Reynolds, Gate 12. I have a young male attempting to access the cockpit. Requesting immediate police assistance." The words hit Malik like cold water. Police assistance? For looking at a cockpit? He stood frozen, unsure if moving would make things worse. His fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack as he watched the pilot glare at him like he was a criminal. Within moments, 2 uniformed airport police officers appeared at the far end of the gate. Their radios crackled as they made their way quickly toward Malik. The passengers' whispers grew louder. Malik could feel every set of eyes on him, some curious, some judgmental, a few pitying. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, and now it felt like it was about to become the worst. The two airport police officers approached quickly, their black boots clicking against the tiled floor. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other shorter but with a serious, no-nonsense expression. Passengers began shifting in their seats to get a better view, some leaning into the aisle, others pulling out their phones, not to record, but to look busy, as if pretending not to stare. "What's going on here?" the tall officer asked, his deep voice calm but authoritative. Before Malik could answer, Captain Reynolds stepped forward, almost blocking him from sight. "This boy was trying to get into the cockpit without permission," the pilot announced, each word sharp and deliberate. "I found him too close to the aircraft. This is a major security concern." The shorter officer turned to Malik, eyebrows raised. "Is that true?" Malik shook his head quickly, his voice trembling. "No, sir. I wasn't trying to get into the cockpit. I just wanted to look. I love planes, and I saw the door open." "That's what they all say," Captain Reynolds interrupted, crossing his arms. "You can't trust anyone getting that close. I've been flying for over 20 years, and I know when something feels off." Something about the way the pilot said "feels off" made Malik's stomach twist. It wasn't just suspicion, it was judgment. The tall officer glanced between the two of them. "Kid, do you have your boarding pass?" Malik fumbled in his pocket, pulling out the crumpled slip of paper. "Yes, sir. I'm supposed to be on this flight." Captain Reynolds let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "And yet you were wandering around where passengers aren't supposed to be. You tell me, does that sound normal to you?" Malik looked down at his sneakers. "I didn't know it wasn't allowed. I wasn't trying to break any rules." The shorter officer took a small step closer. "Son, we take cockpit security very seriously. Since 9/11, no one can just approach the door. That's why the pilot called us." Malik's throat felt dry. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." But the way Captain Reynolds was watching him, it was clear he wasn't satisfied. "Sorry isn't enough when it comes to aviation security," the pilot muttered. "You have to treat every unusual action as a potential threat. That's my job." A woman sitting nearby spoke up softly, "He's just a kid," but her voice trailed off when the pilot shot her a sharp look. Malik could feel his chest tightening. He'd never been in trouble before. His record was clean, his grades were good, and his parents always trusted him to make the right choices. Yet here he was, being treated like a suspect, in front of dozens of strangers. The tall officer pulled out a small notepad. "Name? Malik Carter. Age? 14. And you're traveling alone?" "Yes, sir." The officer wrote it down, then glanced at his partner. Malik caught the subtle shift in their expressions, a flicker of uncertainty, as if even they weren't sure the situation called for police intervention. Still, the shorter officer asked, "Do your parents know you're traveling today?" "Yes. My dad booked my ticket, and my mom dropped me off." The tall officer sighed. "All right. We might need to call them just to confirm things." Malik nodded, even though his heart sank further. Calling his parents meant they'd think something had gone horribly wrong, and in a way, it had. Captain Reynolds folded his arms tighter, clearly satisfied that the situation was being taken seriously. "Good," he said. "We can't afford to take risks. Better to be safe than sorry." But Malik couldn't help thinking, safe for who? He wasn't a threat. He was just a boy who loved airplanes. The shorter officer reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we need contact info for a passenger's guardian. Possible security issue." And that was when Malik's phone began to buzz in his pocket. Malik's hands were shaking as he reached into his pocket. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out and saw the name on the screen, Dad. For a second, relief washed over him. Then worry set in. How could he explain what was happening without making it sound like he was in serious trouble? He swiped to answer. "Dad?" His father's voice came through, calm but with an edge of concern. "Malik, what's going on?" "The airline just called me. They said there's a security situation and you're involved." What happened? Malik's voice wavered. The pilot thinks. I was trying to get into the cockpit. But I wasn't. I just wanted to look. Now the police are here. On the other end of the line, there was a moment of silence, a silence that felt heavy, deliberate. Then his father's tone shifted. Put me on speaker. Right now. Malik hesitated for half a second, then tapped the speaker button. You're on. The tall officer stepped forward. Sir, this is airport security. We're investigating an incident involving your son. The officer stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened slightly. His shoulders straightened. Wait, who did you say you are? Malik could see the shift immediately. The officer's posture changed from casual authority to alert respect. His voice, which had been firm and investigative just moments ago, became more cautious. Yes, sir. I understand. The shorter officer glanced at his partner, confused. What? Who is it? The tall officer covered the phone briefly with his hand, leaning toward him. It's David Carter, FAA Regional Administrator. The shorter officer's eyes went wide. The letters FAA carried serious weight in the aviation world. The Federal Aviation Administration was the authority that oversaw all pilots, aircraft, and airline operations in the United States. And a regional administrator? That meant Malik's father wasn't just an employee, he was one of the highest-ranking officials in the industry. The tall officer returned to the call. Yes, sir. We'll resolve this right away. I apologize for the misunderstanding. We'll make sure your son boards without any further issues. Malik watched this exchange with a mix of confusion and hope. Something had definitely shifted. The tension in the air wasn't about him anymore. It was about the officers realizing they might have just embarrassed the wrong kid. When the officer handed the phone back, Malik's father's voice filled the space. Malik, stay calm. I'll handle this. Give the phone to the pilot. Captain Reynolds, who had been standing stiffly with his arms crossed, blinked in surprise. Me? Yes, you, Malik's father said sharply. This is David Carter, FAA Regional Administrator. You just called the police on my son without asking a single question. I'd like to hear your explanation. For the first time since this began, Captain Reynolds looked uncertain. His confident stance softened. Sir, I was just following security protocol. He was near the cockpit, unsupervised. And you didn't think to speak to him before escalating it to the police? Malik's father's voice was firm, every word precise. You're responsible for the safety of passengers, yes. But you're also responsible for using sound judgment. My son is 14. He had a boarding pass. And you treated him like a criminal. Passengers nearby pretended not to listen, but the air was thick with the weight of the conversation. A woman in the back shook her head in disapproval at the pilot. Captain Reynolds swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't know. That's the problem, Malik's father cut in. You didn't know. You assumed. There was a pause. Then Malik's father's tone softened slightly. Let's make sure this doesn't happen again. I expect my son to be treated with respect for the remainder of his flight. Understood? Yes, sir, the pilot said quietly. The call ended. The officers stepped back. And for the first time since the ordeal began, Malik felt like he could breathe again. Captain Reynolds's face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin, uneasy line. Around them, passengers whispered quietly, trading glances that said they knew something important had just happened, even if they didn't know the full story. The taller officer stepped forward, speaking loud enough for those nearby to hear. The boy's father is David Carter, FAA Regional Administrator. A low ripple of murmurs moved through the waiting area. Even those who didn't fully understand the weight of the title knew it sounded powerful. A few passengers pulled out their phones, no doubt searching the name. Malik stood still, gripping the strap of his backpack, his heart still racing. He didn't like attention, at least, not this kind. but he couldn't deny a small spark of relief knowing the truth had come out. Captain Reynolds's eyes flicked from the officers to Malik, then back to the officers again. I didn't realize," he stammered. "I thought I was doing the right thing." The taller officer raised an eyebrow. "There's a difference between doing your job and making assumptions. He's a minor. You didn't even speak to him before calling us." The shorter officer added, "And you didn't just call us, you radioed in as if there was an immediate threat." Captain Reynolds opened his mouth, but no words came out. His authority, so firm just minutes ago, seemed to crumble under the weight of the truth. Malik finally spoke, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "All I wanted was to see the cockpit, sir. My dad always tells me, if you want to be a pilot, you have to learn how everything works. I wasn't going to touch anything. I just wanted to see." For a moment, the pilot didn't respond. His gaze dropped to the floor, and when he looked back up, there was something in his eyes Malik hadn't seen before, a hint of shame. Passengers who had been watching began to speak up. "He's just a kid," a man in a business suit said. "Not every curious passenger is a threat," added an older woman. A young mother shook her head, holding her toddler close. "I hope this makes you think before you judge someone." Captain Reynolds glanced around, clearly realizing the crowd wasn't on his side. He cleared his throat. "I may have overreacted," he admitted reluctantly. The taller officer nodded. "That's one way to put it." Malik didn't gloat. He simply shifted his backpack and said, "It's okay. Just, next time, maybe ask first." It was a short sentence, but it hit harder than any lecture could. The taller officer gave Malik a reassuring nod before turning to the pilot. "We're done here. The kid is free to board." Captain Reynolds didn't argue. Instead, he stepped aside, letting Malik pass. But the way the pilot's shoulders slumped told everyone in the area that this was a moment he wouldn't forget anytime soon. Once the tension eased, the gate area slowly returned to its usual hum of activity, but the eyes of many passengers still lingered on Malik and the pilot. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some people shaking their heads in disapproval at Captain Reynolds, others glancing at Malik with a mixture of sympathy and quiet admiration. One of the co-pilots, a younger man with a friendly face, approached Malik with a small smile. "Hey, buddy," he said, kneeling slightly so they were eye level. "Would you still like to see the cockpit? I promise it's safe now." Malik's eyes lit up, the excitement he had felt earlier flickering back to life. "Really?" "Really," the co-pilot said, giving a quick glance toward Captain Reynolds, who nodded stiffly in reluctant agreement. Malik followed the co-pilot into the cockpit, the hum of the instruments and the faint smell of leather and metal filling his senses. Buttons, switches, and glowing screens stretched out in front of him like something out of a dream. The co-pilot explained the basics, what each control did, how the navigation worked, and how pilots communicated with the control tower. For Malik, it was pure magic. Every detail felt like a step closer to the dream he'd been chasing since he was little. When he stepped back out, Captain Reynolds was waiting. His expression was softer now, though his pride still kept him from fully meeting Malik's eyes at first. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Son, I owe you an apology," the pilot said, his voice quieter than before. "I judged you without knowing your intentions. I let my assumptions get in the way of doing the right thing. That was wrong." Malik nodded politely. "Apology accepted, sir. But, you should know, not every kid who gets excited about planes is a threat. Some of us just want to fly them one day." The pilot's gaze met his, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a small acknowledgement that both had learned something important that day. As the boarding call echoed through the terminal, Malik walked down the jet bridge, the co-pilot giving him a friendly pat on the shoulder. Behind him, the murmurs of passengers continued, a few smiling in quiet approval. During the flight, Malik thought about how quickly the day had changed. What had started as a simple trip to visit his aunt had turned into a lesson in how easily people could misjudge each other. But it had also reminded him of something his father often said: True strength is staying calm, even when others see you the wrong way. When the plane landed hours later, Captain Reynolds surprised him by personally walking him off the aircraft. "Good luck, Malik," he said quietly. "Maybe one day, I'll be the one flying with you as captain." Malik smiled. Maybe. The story didn't end there. A passenger who had witnessed the entire exchange shared it online, and within days, it went viral. Thousands of people commented, some praising Malik's calmness, others calling for better awareness in the airline industry. But for Malik, the real takeaway wasn't the attention. It was the reminder that even when others doubt you, your passion and dignity can speak louder than their assumptions. One day, he promised himself, he'd wear the captain's uniform. And when he did, he'd make sure every curious kid felt welcome in the cockpit. Speech balloon. Wow, what a powerful story. If this touched your heart as much as it did mine, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us share more inspiring stories like this. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment that could change the way you see the world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.